Well, hello all my DIY friends, and I've got a little repair project today that's going to turn into actually an improvement project. I've got a table that I made several years back that's been sitting on my back patio, and the top of it was made from pallet wood, and the pallet wood is all rotten. And what I've found out over the years, it's tough to keep this pallet wood from rotting. Well, I still have some pieces from the old Bluebird box projects left over. This is solid oak, trees that were actually on Fowl River or Dog River here in Mobile, and it's spalted. And I'm going to use these pieces of wood to make a new tabletop. And I'm going to be able to configure these pieces in here in such a way that when I glue them together, and then use some of the cutoffs and piece them together, I'm going to get kind of a checkerboard look almost, but with all this spalted wood. So the first thing I have to do, I've got one edge of these boards straight. I need to clean up the other edge of the board. Then I'm going to kind of piece them together and glue them. And I think this gluing process is going to have to go in several steps. So first thing I need to do is get these edges cleaned up, and I'm going to do that with my table saw. Now the next thing I have to do is I have to square up all the ends of the boards. And some of them are going to be very square because they were cut on a miter saw, but some of them aren't. And I'm just going to make sure I get them all good and square before we get started. So I'm just using the miter slide here on my table saw, and I'm just going to nick off the ends of each piece. All right, so the next step is going to be gluing these pieces of wood together. And I think I'm going to have to glue them up in stages. I've got 5 pieces here that I'm going to glue together, and they're staggered. And then once they're glued together, I'm then going to fill in these other pieces and glue them. I'm concerned if I try and glue them all at the same time that I'm going to get it not quite glued up square. So if I'm gluing these pieces here, all I'm going to do is just have the pressure right across the middle here, and I'll be able to get a real good joint. And then I think it'll be easy to then fill in and glue the rest. All right, well, here's the first part of the glue up. I'm going to let this sit overnight so it gets good and dry before I try and mess with it and put the other pieces in there. So, you know, little project that just little time in between. So I'll see y'all in the morning. All right, so my piece that I glued up yesterday is all dry. And now I need to add these other pieces in here and glue them. And I've done a little pre-fitting as to which piece is going to go where, and so it's going to look like that. A couple of them are very tight, which I like. So what I'm going to do now is put a little glue in here on these pieces, clamp them up. I'll come back and show you when I'm done. Then I got to let them sit for a while and dry before I keep going. All right, so there we go. I've got those 3 pieces in there and glued. Got clamps on them pushing this way, and on this one pulling in. I didn't need to pull in here because this was very tight, and I had to take a rubber mallet and hammer it up in there, so it's not going anywhere. Now, what I used for the roundness of this tabletop, the diameter is my grill top. This was the only thing I had that was round when I built that original table. So this is going to sit on there perfect. I'm going to be able to cut it out. I'm going to have to add 2 more little pieces, one over here and one over here. And I'll get those pieces after I trim off some of these other ones. So there's going to be 1 more little glue up to get this whole tabletop done. Then I can cut it to round and go about finishing it. And I think this is going to be beautiful when it's finished. All right, so I've got those other pieces glued in there. Glue is all dry. Now I got to make a couple of cuts here. And I've got to cut these 2 boards off right here at that length. And I'm going to cut this board off right here at that length. Then I'll take 2 of those pieces and glue them into these open spots. And then what I will have is I'll have a square that will be big enough to put that grill lid on, trace my circle, use my saber saw to cut out the circle, and then go about finishing this table. So I'm just going to use my circular saw here and my crosscut jig that I use, line it up where I want to cut. Okay, there goes those 2. Now let me get this one. And yes, I was using my solar generated, my little solar generator, the 12-volt battery, to run that circular saw. And now I will choose which of these pieces, probably these 2 right here that are very spalted, glue them in there, and glue one down here. And once that glue's dry, then I'll be able to cut that circle out. All right, so I've got everything glued up. Now I need to prepare this surface. I got to get it flat. I got to get it smooth. And so I'm going to start with my electric hand planer. I'm going to get outside in the driveway so I'm not creating dust in here. But I'm going to use the electric hand planer and get it as flat as I can, and then I'm going to go to sanding. And I want to do this while it's still more in this square shape. I think it'll be easier. I think I'll get a better finish on it than if I cut the circle out now. So I'm going to get it as smooth as I can before I cut the circle. Now I did come across one problem when I was getting the rest of the top off of this table, the rest of the rotten boards. I thought the whole base of the table was still structurally good, and the legs are good, but I've got a bunch of rot in the rails here. So that's going to be another issue. I'll worry about that when I get to it, but I think I can salvage the legs and just create some new rails. We'll see how that goes. So I've got this hand planer set to 1/32 of an inch, and I'm just going to start gradually going across this. I got to go get some safety glasses. All right, so let me make a couple of passes here, and I'm not going to bore y'all with me doing the whole thing, but let me make a couple of passes and see how it works. Okay, kind of like that. And this is why I wanted to leave it rough before I cut the circle. Just so if I ding up the edges, I'm going to cut that stuff off anyway. I'm just worried about this middle part. I'm actually going to get my vacuum cleaner and hook it up to here, so I'm catching all these sawdust. Well, the hose on my shop vac is a whole lot bigger than that, so that's not going to work. So I'm just going to create a mess and vacuum as I go. How you doing? All right, so I hit it about 5 or 6 passes. Last pass, I've dropped it down to 1/64 of an inch. Now it's not perfectly smooth. I never thought I was going to get it perfectly smooth, but now I'm going to start hitting it with my orbital sander. 80 grit to start with, working my way down to 150 grit. Look how nice this has turned out. Look at all of the spalted wood and how much more exposed it got when I did the sanding. That's just great grain. Here's the line. I've put my grill top on here to outline where I'll cut it in a circle. But you can see I've got a few cracks or spaces where I did the glue up that, you know, I just didn't quite get flush. I mean, with my tools, it's never going to get flush. So I need to take some wood putty and fill those cracks up, let it dry, do a little more sanding, and then I'll cut the top. All right, so I got all the spots filled that I wanted. I got all the excess wood putty sanded off. Now I'm going to cut the circle. This is always the most nerve-wracking part to me. But I'm going to start right here on this edge and just take my time and go around this as best I can. Wow, that was pretty good right there. I was right on the line. All right, let me keep going. Well, look at that. That's awesome. That looks great. Now I just got to sand the edges, get everything a little smoother. I may take my router and put a bevel, you know, a round over on it, but then again, I may not. Well, look at this. Now, I decided to just sand the edges and kind of give it a little round over. Because I was using that jigsaw or saber saw, whatever you want to call it, this thing is not perfectly round. There's a couple of places on here where there was a little waver, and I was a little bit afraid to use the router on it, but I'm really happy with the way this thing has come out. I'm going to end this video here because I salvaged 3 of the legs from the base, and I need to build another base for it. So that's going to be the next video. So you'll see the completed video and the completed tabletop with it finished in the next video when I build the base. I don't want this video to get much longer, but this is just absolutely beautiful. The spalted wood right here. It's nice and smooth. And again, it's not perfectly flat. I don't have the tools to make it perfectly flat. I'm not skilled enough to make it perfectly flat, but it's flat enough, and it gives it a little bit of a rustic look, a very much a handmade look, which I like. So folks, I want to thank you so much for coming in and looking at this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment below. If you never subscribed to my channel, please do, because remember, like I always say, if you've got an idea, you can do it easy if you just put your mind to it. Thanks, y'all. This was a fun project. I'll see you next time.